All right, everyone, thank you for joining us. Welcome, and thank you for joining today's session on the best practices for pay-as-you-throw waste reduction model, or otherwise known as the PAYT tune-up webinar. First, I wanted to acknowledge each of you. As part of the more than 160 communities in Massachusetts that have taken on the PAYT model, you are making a real impact on waste reduction. This is a powerful strategy, and implementing it successfully amid fiscal, operational, and political challenges is a significant achievement. You should feel proud of the work that you're doing in your communities. Now, let's talk about why today's meeting is so important. We know that PAYT is one of the most effective programs available for cutting costs and reducing waste. But even with its many strengths, there are quote unquote trap doors, challenges that, if not managed carefully, can threaten your program's stability. And for as much as we waste reduction advocates love PAYT, it is a model that can be easy for critics to pick apart, often giving the impression that things aren't working as they should. So today we're going to take a deep dive into the best practices to keep your programs not only on track, but if needed, primed for growth. Whether you're looking to fine-tune your approach or expand it further, we've got an information-packed session for you to help you make the most of your PAYT program in your community. We're going to take about an hour for this particular webinar, and let's get started. I think everyone has seen this slide enough for me not to dive too deep into it. You're here on Zoom. If you'd like to participate, again, please mute yourself. Feel free to shut off your video or keep it on. It's up to you. You can look at your participant list, and the chat function is going to be something that we would really like you to pay attention to. Before that, just know that this meeting is being recorded and that we will later share this meeting on the MassDEP's YouTube channel. And then we'll also make the slides available on our website. If you don't have that website bookmarked, it's pretty easy. Just Google MassDEP PAYT, and you'll find it there on the #1 link. And it'll be there probably late next week. And lastly, for participation, we do want you to participate, and if you choose to hang around towards the end, we will make plenty of time for your questions. Most of the content of the webinar will end in an hour, but we will stay a little later if necessary. Actually, before we get to that, we'd just like to say that this webinar is going to be packed with a lot of information. We're going to have a lot of links and resources, and my colleague Brian will be dropping those in the chat. And it is also likely that you're going to have questions, thoughts, and ideas as we move through the webinar. And please put those right in the chat when you think of them, because we'd like to address them at the end, and we don't want to forget them. So as things come to your head, feel free to put them right in the chat. And in fact, we based actually much of this presentation off of the good work that you all have been doing in your communities. So if there's something that we forgot to include, something you're particularly proud of in your community, please let us know in the chat. Remind us of the good things you're doing that we may not have covered today. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Brian Walsh, who's going to take you through some survey results.
Hey, thank you, Ron. And thank you to everyone who filled out this little pre-webinar survey so we can get a sense of how the program's running in your community. For anyone who hasn't filled it out yet, we will I'll also put that link for the survey at the end. We'd love to still collect your insights on it so we can have and make this a more robust data. So look for that at the end of the presentation. But now we'll jump into the results. Okay, so overall survey says that for the most part, PAYT is going pretty well in a lot of communities. You guys can see this breakdown, the majority of people listing it as a 4, and then we got some on both edges. Yeah, so I think for everyone, it's a great opportunity to realize that there's room for improvement for everyone. So with that, we'll go into the next slide. I thought this was a cool slide. Maybe we feel optimistic about the program and the future of the program, that there seems to be a lot of favorability in the program for a lot of people in different groups, ranging from operations to the admin staff to elected officials. And naturally, I don't think it's too surprising to see a little bit of the blue there with residents. But even the fact that that's not entirely blue all the way up to 10, I think is also a good sign that not all residents are super anti-PAYT once the program gets going. And then the last slide, we asked a little bit about program adjustments being made over the last few years. So you guys can see a little bit of the different changes that were made here. So again, these are some of the things that we'll dive more into the webinar. And obviously after the webinar, changes that jump out to you, talk to your MAC. And yeah, hopefully we all learn a lot more about why these changes work in the next hour. So thank you all for your time, and I will pass it over to Kathy for the first section.
Great. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon, and thanks for joining this webinar today. Now, most of you are here today because you already have a pay-as-you-throw program and you want to give it a tune-up so that it can remain effective and viable. I've had the opportunity when I was a MAC to work with many communities on their pay-as-you-throw programs and learned a great deal along the way, and want to share much of that back with you. Now, hopefully your municipality has already experienced the benefits of managing less trash from your pay-as-you-throw program, along with a reduction in your disposal costs. And with less trash to pick up, your hauler is likely completing their collection routes more efficiently, and that could be saving you money on the collection side as well. So to keep that program strong over time, oh, this is the next slide, Brian, by the way. To keep that program strong over time, we want to give some attention to tuning up our PAYT programs in Mass so you can continue to reap the benefits and operate efficiently for the long term. So the goal of Pay-as-you-throw, which is shown on this slide, and some of the considerations you want to always keep in mind, the goal is to incentivize trash reduction by making costs transparent to residents. And you want to couple that with plenty of opportunities for recycling, composting, and reuse so that everyone has the opportunity to be successful and control their own costs. Now, if your bag or sticker fee hasn't changed in several years, it's time to evaluate the program and make updates to really ensure that your costs are covered and that the fees are set fairly. You'll want to consider things like the progression of fees for different container or bag sizes so that you're incentivizing less waste and not mistakenly providing more value through use of a larger bag or cart. You also want to have a really good pulse on the private subscription haulers that are operating in your municipality, since your municipal programs may be competing with private subscription service. So you want to ensure a level playing field by requiring that recyclables are picked up for all trash customers in your community. And don't forget to look at bulky waste fees, which I'll talk about more in just a few moments. Next slide, please. So as you evaluate your program and consider updates, you're going to want to review the needs of your population, which may have changed over the past several years. Do you have seniors who may have be working off of a fixed income, and they often produce less trash? You want to be sure there's an option for them. Do you have families that would benefit from programs that are flexible? Sometimes they're expanding these families, and sometimes they're shrinking as a household, and being able to shift and be flexible is meaningful. Do you serve multifamilies, and how is the program working for them? Do you offer discounts or subsidies to low-income households? Or do you provide extra services for people with disabilities? These are all the types of service options that are important to consider. And if you are updating your contract, that's a great window of opportunity to address some of these issues that can really strengthen your program and the services you provide. And if you do indeed modify your services, your fees will need to be updated simultaneously. Next slide, please. So fees are typically set to cover all program costs, and we know that these costs change over time. So your fees should be updated as well. Because regardless of what community you're in, likely you're all experiencing some increases in your trash disposal costs or tipping fees. Your pay-as-you-throw bags, the cost of the bags themselves goes up over time. The cost of staffing and administration, or it could be the cost of prevailing wages for the collectors, for the haulers. If you're a community that may be transitioning from a PAYT bag program to a cart program for automated collection, you will see your costs change because of those carts. And of course, ongoing outreach and education and enforcement is really, really essential in these programs, and that always has a cost associated with it. So we really recommend reviewing your fees on an annual basis. And it's even better if it's possible to codify this somehow in your municipality as a yearly process, because that can really help avoid any political pushback on fee changes that will inevitably occur. We know that fees can be a hot button issue for decision makers. And so by codifying it, it becomes part of the process that everyone gets used to. I do suspect that many of you have an enterprise fund for your pay-as-you-throw program. If you don't have one, it's certainly a good idea to look at and consider. We can certainly touch on this in the Q&A if folks would like to ask more about it, or we can speak offline if that's helpful to you. So now I just wanted to do a couple of slides that would be a brief refresher on understanding the fixed costs and variable costs so that you can strike the right balance with your program fees. So fixed costs are the costs that'll always be there, regardless of how much waste is being managed. So think of them that way. Fixed costs will commonly include the collection and transportation costs for your solid waste and recyclables, the truck going down the street, or the transportation from a transfer station to the disposal outlet. Operating your transfer station or recycling center, those are fixed. The processing of recyclables is generally fixed, and certainly program administration. A key to managing the fixed costs is that you want to have a predictable source of revenue to cover your fixed costs. So those are typically covered through the tax base, through a flat fee, or some combination of those. And then there are variable costs. Now, variable costs are primarily based on the amount of trash that's disposed. And with a pay-as-you-throw program, as you know, that amount is going to change over time, and ideally it's going to keep reducing over time. So you want the fee that to be paid for, those variable costs paid for through the PAYT bags, the stickers, carts, whatever mechanism you're using for PAYT. And then we also don't want to forget about bulky waste fees when bulky items are being managed as trash. Always keep in mind that the goal is less trash over time, so fewer bag sales will mean less bag revenue. And that's why it's really important to get this balance right. So next slide, please. So I wanted to just give you an example to walk you through what it looks like to set a pay-as-you-throw bag fee. And you could use this whether you're updating this or whether you're doing this for the first time. But when you think about the pay-as-you-throw bag fee, it's really about the disposal of the trash contained in that bag, along with the cost of the bag itself. Again, this is a variable cost. So in this example, we have a community, I gave a nice round number here that the trash tipping fee is $100 per ton. We know that there are 2,000 pounds in a ton, so that equates to 5 cents per pound. The average weight of a filled 33-gallon PAYT trash bag is 25 pounds. And that's really pretty close based on the data that we get reported over time, and we look at it very closely. It's a very reasonable number to put in there as an estimate. So if 25 pounds for the average large PAYT bag times 5 cents a pound is $1.25 to dispose of the amount of trash in that bag. Then you want to add to that the cost of the bag itself, which is about 40 cents, depending on the quantity a community is purchasing off of state contract, for example. So there's $1.65, but we want to have some wiggle room there. So reasonably, it would be to round up the cost, the fee charge for that bag to be $2 per bag. Now, one thing I want to just really point out for communities to keep in mind, because we hear this again and again, some communities actually incorporate some of the collection cost, some of your fixed costs within the bag fee. I would not recommend that communities go too far with this. It doesn't have to be like an exact science, but if you put too much of any of the fixed costs, like collection, onto the bag fee, it could set a community up for some problems with getting enough revenue to cover costs as your trash tonnages go down. Again, your bag fees and your bag revenues, the bag revenue, I should say, will go down as well. So you really want to be mindful that the fee you set for your bags is primarily for the disposal of trash in that bag and the bag itself. Next slide, please. Now, if you offer multiple bag sizes in your PAYT program, you want to be sure to incentivize trash reduction by creating more value for residents who reduce the most waste. The smallest bag should be the best value, because the bag fee is really signaling a choice to residents. And you want residents to choose the lowest bag, the lowest amount. Okay. So for example, we have a community here. So I've got two different examples. One of them that has something called proportional pricing and one that's got progressive pricing. So the first one, say you've got a community with a 33-gallon trash bag and also a 16-gallon trash bag. And the amount of trash in the 33 is virtually twice as much as what's in the 16. So in this case, the large bag fee could be $2 per bag and the smaller bag could be $1 per bag, proportional. There's another way to frame this as well if you want to have an even stronger incentive to encourage residents to go for the smaller trash bag, is to make the larger bag a little more than twice the cost. If it costs $2.50 for a larger bag and $1 for a smaller bag, there's actually a little bit more value in that smaller bag in terms of cost savings. And it might drive residents to use the smaller bag and try to reduce waste and recycle more. It's just a way of thinking about what we're trying to incentivize here. Okay. Remember, trash reduction is always your goal. Next slide, please. Now, here's an example of fee setting with a 35-gallon trash carts. We are seeing, more communities, or many communities, I should say, considering a transition from a full PAYT bag program, sometimes to incorporate the use of automated collection and carts. And so in this scenario, again, just wanted to give you a snapshot of what it could look like. The disposal costs are essentially the same as what we just did for the bag, except that a 35-gallon cart can fit a little bit more than a 33-gallon bag. And so the actual cost to pick up the trash in that container is a little bit more. We mentioned 35-gallon carts explicitly because that's the maximum trash cart size that would be considered a hybrid pay-as-you-throw program in DEP's eyes. Okay. So as I mentioned, the main difference here is that the cart holds a little bit more than the bag. It's certainly reasonable to round up the cost of that service, but the overflow options are what are particularly important here, because communities will want to have some kind of option for residents, whether it's an overflow bag or an overflow cart. And one of the program types that we've been hearing more about as a possibility is to offer a second 35-gallon trash cart at a certain fee, an annual price for servicing for households that need more capacity on an ongoing basis. The beauty of using a second 35-gallon trash cart is that the only carts in that community will be 35-gallon in size. For easier administration of the program and more flexibility. So say a household has two 35-gallon trash carts, but a couple years from now, the municipality starts collecting organics or food scraps at the curb. And in a scenario like that, a household is going to generate a lot less waste. And that household may realize, you know what, we don't need two carts anymore. We're certainly covered by that one 35-gallon trash cart. Flexibility is available when you have multiples of one cart size. And by staying with the 35, it's still considered a pay-as-you-throw program, which makes the community eligible for our grants as well. It's another reason we really promote the 35. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide, but last but not least, I want to be sure to mention this about bulky items and to make sure that if you are managing your bulky items as trash or as waste, you're going to want to have fees associated with that. You want to think about this as an extension of your pay-as-you-throw program. Of course, reuse is the best option, and recycling if that's available to you. We know that the best performing programs across the state do, though, employ bulky waste fees so that only the residents who generate excess waste are paying for this service. So that's my last slide, and I'm going to pass this now to Julia Green.
You're muted, Julia.
Sorry about that. Next slide. Thank you, Kathy. So pay-as-you-throw is about limiting trash. The picture on the left was taken in Methuen before they moved to a cart system. They had an ordinance that specified 50 pounds per week. No one knew what that looked like, and there was no enforcement. So Methuen had, at the time, the highest pounds per household of trash in the state. So pay-as-you-throw bags at curbside is limited to only PAYT bags that are usually bright colored with a town sale stamped on it. The hauler doesn't pick anything else up. The resident is also limiting trash because they have to pay for the pay-as-you-throw bag. And so they try to keep their costs down by diverting everything that is divertible, recycling, food waste, textiles, etc. So the pay-as-you-throw 35-gallon cart program do the same. The carts are uniform and easily identifiable to the hauler. Usually the municipality is paying for the 35-gallon cart disposal, so that first 35 gallons is perceived to be free to the resident, although they still pay for it through either the tax base or trash fees. Most cart programs include overflow bags, which look the same as pay-as-you-throw bags. Again, the bags are easily identifiable to the hauler, so if it's not in a cart or bag, it doesn't get collected. So the next slide. So, and then I have to, oh. Okay, so even though it is clear that pay-as-you-throw limits trash, I can't emphasize how important it is to put that in your hauling contract. Here are two simple clauses that can be used in your curbside contract, depending on whether you use only bags or carts. Add these to your liquidated damages list in the contract too, so that if a driver is picking more up than just pay-as-you-throw bags or 35-gallon cart, you can assess damages to the hauler. So I'm going to read that a little bit. The hauler will only collect trash in an approved municipal pay-as-you-throw bag that residents purchase at local retail stores. And the next one is for the carts. Solid waste containers shall be furnished by the municipality and will be a 35-gallon issued wheeled cart, which when loaded is not to exceed a weight of 40 pounds. Municipalities approved overflow bags available at local retail stores shall be used for any overflow extra trash above and beyond the 35-gallon cart limit. So this is really like how we keep the trash down. Next slide. So another thing that's on contract is pay-as-you-throw bags are on state contract. And there are 3 vendors, and you all know this. But what we've, so you should use that state contract. But what we've noticed is that some municipalities, quite a few, start off with the state contract, but then put a separate contract into place. So we really want you to check with OSD to verify that what you want to do is in fact covered by the state contract, because it probably is. The state contract already has the proper contractual protections and guarantees in place to protect your municipality. So please use that. And when we get to the discussion, if anybody wants to talk about if they did a separate contract, why you did a separate contract. So next slide. Since we are talking about contracts and pay-as-you-throw, I never let an opportunity pass me by to talk about good contract administration. Next slide. So your job is not done once a contract is put into place. There is work to be done for the smooth operation of the program. You need to monitor the contract, confirm quality service, keep track of service, key dates and milestones, and maintain a contract file. Next slide. So monitoring the contract is so important. In monitoring a curbside pay-as-you-throw hauling contract is mostly the same as any other curbside program. You'll have missed pickups and delays. In bag programs, you may have the occasional resident buying similar colored bags on Amazon and trying to pass them off as an official pay-as-you-throw bag. In car programs, you may have residents snow coning with lids wide open and trash piled up. Enforcement is key. If a driver is picking up more than the limit for a particular resident, other residents will let you know. It's important to nip problems in the bud because residents care about fairness, and it's important that they have confidence in the municipality to administer the program. Next slide. So ongoing education and outreach are key to a successful program. Residents change. Some move out, some move in, and the municipality they are coming from probably did things a little differently. Recycling rules change, and in Massachusetts, new waste bans come into effect from time to time. So MassDEP developed Recycle Smart MA so that Massachusetts residents can stay on top of the rules. There is a webinar next Wednesday, November 13th, for municipalities to be updated on Recycle Smart MA. If you missed the invite, contact your MAC for the link to register, or maybe someone will drop it in the chat. Remember that the hauler is your partner in compliance. Have a system where the hauler sends in daily tag lists so you know what is a missed pickup and what is an improperly set out of trash and recycling. At transfer stations, attendants do the compliance work instead of the hauler. Next slide. So we also need to confirm quality service service by keeping records and collecting data. This picture shows a former recycling coordinator in the city of Salem inspecting recycling carts using the methodology of the Recycling IQ kit. If you are just moving to carts, you may want to focus on enforcement of recycling in the first few months of the cart rollout. One fear in moving to a cart program is that recycling will be more contaminated. Keeping on top of outreach and education will not only ensure that recycling is clean, it will also show the hauler that you are on top of the program. Next slide. Lastly, maintaining your contract file. Make sure the hauler renews their performance bond every year. A well-maintained contract file will set you up well for your future program and contract, as well as protect the municipality if something goes wrong. So next slide. So, sorry, I guess I jumped ahead there. Sorry, because
I
now
think there
we're
were
back to this
flip-flops. That's
one.
okay. I think we just,
Oh, okay.
you're on the right.
So yeah, back to this is maintaining monthly records and analyzing the data allows you to correct irregularities right away. So has your tonnage gone up? Is there new housing that was added that would explain the increase? Have you followed the trucks on their routes lately? Are you reconciling invoices? We find lots of errors on invoices. Verified tonnage with weight slips. When you add a new program element, for instance, bulky waste fees added or new information on your webpage on how to divert used furniture for donation, follow how much that impacts tonnage. This helps inform how you want to change your program in the future. Okay, so we'll go on to the next slide. And the next slide. So we're sliding in here private hauler regulations. Many of you, especially drop-off and subscription programs, have private haulers operating in your municipalities for those residents that opt out of the municipal program. To keep costs down, many private haulers don't offer recycling, and so everything gets thrown in the trash. The private haulers and the residents that use them are not complying with Massachusetts waste bans. Passing private hauler regulations requires that all haulers working in the municipality be permitted and that they offer a bundled service of both trash and recycling for one price. A bundled service of trash and recycling levels the playing field for the drop-off or curbside municipal subscription program that also require recycling in their programs. So you don't want to be outcompeted by the local private haulers, which will really hurt your program. Next slide. So even putting into place the private hauler regulations, is your drop-off program shrinking? And is it time to move to a curbside program? So we now have a contract bank with contracts from many municipalities. Although we have suspected that curbside hauling programs offer more convenience and cost savings than drop-off programs, we now have data that shows this. This table shows 3 PAYT drop-off programs in Northeast District 3. They have low participation, ranging from 44 to 16%. As the number of residents using the transfer station program dwindles, the cost to run the programs gets distributed among those that remain, causing the price for the annual sticker and/or PAYT bags to increase to cover program costs. The 3 municipalities shaded in green are curbside 35-gallon cart communities. In each of the first 35 gallons is free, which means it's included in the cost of the program. So look at how high participation is in these programs, 95% and 81%. These are not subscription programs, but all in, as established by households, serve generally 1 to 4 families, but could be as high as 6 family dwellings. Some towns allow for opt-outs if the household can show that they have an active subscription with a private hauler, but it is not common. Now look at the total cost per household. I tried to make as much of an apples to apples comparison. I assume that the transfer station total costs include the running of the transfer station and trash disposal, hauling of trash and recycling, and the recycling processing. For the curbside hauling program, I took the cost of the hauling contract for trash and recycling and added this disposal costs. Let me just slide down. And the estimated recycling processing costs. The per household costs are lowest for the curbside programs and service most households. Since many residents do not want to make trips to the transfer station on a weekly basis to dispose of their trash, those residents opting out of the transfer station would be happy to see the municipality offering a curbside program, as the cost savings are generally large, even if the resident would pay the full cost, which could be done by establishing an enterprise fund for the curbside program. And as you know, many of these private hauler programs in some of the suburbs are as high as $1,000 a month. I mean, $1,000 a year for the residents. So if the municipality does move to a curbside program, they should think about new uses for the transfer station. A pared down recycling center could be kept and open on Saturdays for residents to dispose of hard to recycle items. Depending on the amount of land at the transfer station, that land could go to other uses. So next slide. This is my last slide. So not only are the cost savings greater for a curbside hauling program, the environmental impact is also considerably less, as demonstrated by this model that was put together by a graduate student intern working with the town of Acton. Note that even though a diesel waste truck averages only 3 miles per gallon and the average car averages 25 miles per gallon, that is 8 times the mileage. It is still much more efficient to have 2 diesel trucks picking up trash and recycling in the town if you estimate that on any given week, 2,500 cars will make a trip to the transfer station to drop off their trash and recycling. And this is a conservative estimate because this town had 4,497 households with stickers to use the transfer station. By moving to curbside, the town cuts its emissions to 20% of the emissions emitted by all the cars on the road to and from the transfer station. Now think about how this equation would change with electric trucks. That's the greenhouse gas footprint that we need to start to turn the tide on climate change. And next slide, and I'm going to pass it to Missy now, and she's going to show you a few towns.
Thank you, Julia. I love those last 2 slides. That information is new to me, and I want to thank you for doing that research. I'm going to be sharing that info with my munis who definitely can benefit from that. So I'm going to talk about some key successes in a few municipalities. So next slide, Ron. So we're going to look at Dartmouth, Malden, Natick, North Attleboro, Weston, and Worcester. And they're all slightly different because one size does not fit all. Next slide. We're going to start with Dartmouth. Dartmouth started with PAYT bags in 2007. They have recycling and trash at curbside and at pickup. I'm sorry, at drop off and at curbside. 87% of the eligible households use the program, and annually they collect 1,055 pounds per household. The program is funded by bags, access fee, transfer station per visit fee. And some of the keys to their success is that they have an active recycling center with Charm that accepts plastic bags, films, and they just started collecting organics in 2024. They also have regional programs with the Greater New Bedford Regional Refuse Management District, which allows, again, more expanded programs with the larger community. And this is another community that has municipal collected trash, and we're going to see some more a little bit later on. Next slide, Ron. So Malden's, I call a unicorn. They're a very unique program, but they started with PAYT bags in 2008. In 2021, they moved to carts. They have recycling and trash at the curb, and 68% of eligible households use the program. 1,360 pounds are collected annually per household, and the program is funded by a bag program or the stickers or taxes, excuse me. The key to their success is kind of this unique model that they've created, the unicorn, so to speak. And that is where they have the PAYT bags, the municipal bags, will go into 35-gallon carts. But some residents might not want to use that. So Malden has allowed residents to purchase a sticker that would go onto the cart, and residents can use regular old, black or white or whatever color bags they want that you can get from any store, and that could go into the cart. So this is a very unique program for them. They also have a very active recycling center with a Charm. They have paper shredding events, and that they also have universal waste for mercury containing items. They have also adopted the private hauler regulations that Julia had mentioned earlier. And they also had a cool program, but they hired summer interns. And what they did is they went door to door looking at the residents' recycling. The idea with this enforcement wasn't fining anyone, but it is basically a education opportunity for residents to understand what's in their program. And it was a huge success. Next slide. So this is a little bit more about Malden's program. So again, in Malden, if you decide that you want to have a sticker and use any of the black bags or the white bags, that would go right into your bin there. Or if you want to use the PAYT bags, the blue ones from the town, that can go into your 35-gallon cart, but you don't need to pay extra for that sticker. It's already in there. And then there's some examples of those oops tags that they used that were very clear and easy to understand. Next slide, Ron. We're going to be looking at Natick. Natick started with PAYT bags in 2003. They have recycling and trash curbside. 79% of eligible households use their program. 1,082 pounds annually are collected per household. And their program is funded through the cost of the bags and taxes. Some of the keys to Natick's successes are that they also have municipally collected trash, meaning that instead of having a private hauler or a company, their municipal employees collect that trash. They also have an active recycling center with charm, paper shredding, and U-waste. Are you noticing the theme here? They also have organics that are collected curbside, which is partially funded by the town. The cost of it is partially funded by the town. And the town also funds the free bins to the residents as well. The other nice thing that the town does is that they're providing over 5,000, almost 6,000 free bags to families in need that are referred to them by the town's social service agency. And they also have a really great explanation, probably one of the best I've seen, about PAYT on their website. Next slide, Ron. And this is an example. It's just very clear. It shows that when they, before they had PAYT, and then as they slid down to 2015, you can see that they're still considering to save tonnage as well. They don't carry it out, but then, it kind of peters out and it kind of stays at the same for all that time. But you can very easily see, and this is another way for those residents who might not like the program to understand why we're going through it. It does save trash tonnage. Next slide. North Attleboro. So North Attleboro started with PAYT bags in 1998. However, just last summer, they moved to 35-gallon carts. They have recycling and trash curbside and at drop-off. And the 85% of the eligible households use the program. 1,187 pounds annually are collected per household. And the program is funded through transfer station permit fee and an annual fee. So one of the ways that they handle the trash at their transfer station is they have a scale. Residents can use bags. And one thing we do want to mention is that as they move to this new program with the 35-gallon carts, their tonnage did increase, and this was expected. We have models, and we've talked about this in other MERCs, that the tonnage will go up when you move from a PAYT bag to a cart program. So it went up within the expected range. So North Attleboro also has an active recycling center with charm, organics drop-off. They're soon to be having a swap shop. And they also have U-waste collection. So the U-waste collection is going to be a new category requirement for the charms. So this is a great thing that they already have this set up. And then they also have private hauler regulations. Next slide, Ron. Weston. So Weston started with PAYT bags in 2021. They have drop-off for trash and recycling. 43% of the eligible households use the program. They have collect 680 pounds annually per household. Wow. And their program is funded through a low transfer station sticker fee of $5. The bags fund the program and also the property tax. Weston also has an active recycling center with a charm. They have a universal waste shed. They also accept bulky waste and organics. The one very unique thing about Weston, and Julia had mentioned this in her presentation, is that they have a yearly review of the bag prices. And it's actually built into their program that a certain percentage of the cost will be funded by the bags. And this is something that actually goes to town meeting every year. So this is, kind of ties in with the next part about their transparency. They probably have one of the most transparent and easy to understand programs for what your trash costs that I've seen. And I think it might be worthwhile for some communities to look into this. So they also have private hauler regulations, and they're basically meeting the residents' needs. So one of the unique things about their program, so they have a transfer station sticker fee, but also they have a $150 horse fee. So if you want to drop off horse manure, it will cost you $150 per horse. Next slide, Ron. And this is an example on their website. What they do is monthly, they actually share their costs and their tonnage. And so it's laid out right there for their residents. So they know exactly what's going on. So they do this monthly. They just update this spreadsheet. And then also at the end of the year, they kind of collate it all into one big package for their residents to see that. So it's, again, one of the most transparent I've seen. And I think it's a pretty good model. Next one, please. So Worcester is our last program. Worcester started with PAYT bags in 1993. They have recycling curbside and at drop-off. 82% of the eligible households use the program. 874 pounds annually are collected per household, but this does not include bulky waste. Their program is funded by the cost of the bags and by new taxes. Some of the keys to their success is that they also have municipal collected trash. They also have an active recycling center charm that are open to all residents. You don't have to be a certain household size. It can open to everyone. They also have a really good use of press and good communications so that the residents kind of know what's going on. And they also are thinking outside the box. And I'm going to show you that on our next slide. So one of the ways Worcester is thinking outside the box, they actually added vending machines. So they have vending machines that are in their, what they call their customer convenience center. So where residents can kind of get additional services. And they have the vending machine there. So they also have a zero waste trash talk with their coordinator, and you can look at that all the time. They have a number of programs that they talk about. And then a few years ago, Worcester started giving their residents lidded recycling bins because their items were blowing all over. And if you're familiar with Worcester, it's very hilly. So this was another thing of them just thinking outside the box and doing something different. So I'm going to turn this back over to Ron.
Thank you very much, Missy. Thanks to all the presenters so far. We're going to add a few more tips that we didn't get a chance to cover in everyone else's, and maybe reiterate a few as well, just to help make your PAYT program stick. Before I get into that, I just want to quickly mention that if you wanted to watch, we did conduct a webinar in the spring for communities that were basically, it was an intro to Pay As You Throw. So if for some reason you're on this call and your community hasn't implemented it, you may want to go and take that webinar in, and it's great content. And again, this will replay as well. So just a few top tips. First of all, you may want to consider adding PAYT to your climate action plan. So basically, moreover, adding waste reduction goals to your climate action plan. And it basically gives you kind of a hook to hang your PAYT program on. I've given a couple of really good examples of cities that have incorporated these waste reduction goals into these plans. So feel free, to work that into your own. Next is take advantage of grant funding to upgrade or improve your program. Our Sustainable Materials Recovery Program plan funds in the form of either PAYT grant funds or recycling dividend program funds can be used. So if you see in the top half of this slide, it talks about some grant funding that's available basically to convert from one program to another. And that would be a per household served award. So depending on what you plan to do, it can be substantial, especially those communities that are looking to upgrade to carts. And again, as Kathy mentioned earlier, as long as those carts stay to that 35-gallon size. And then on the lower half of the slide, you'll notice that I put in there the model program section of your RDP spending categories to show you that things related to PAYT, especially expanding your program, are eligible to use recycling dividends program funds. Diversion opportunities, that's popped up quite a few times in this presentation. We'll reiterate it here. waistbands, recycling centers, reuse, food scraps, making it convenient for folks, promoting, all these concepts heavily, putting all these concepts into multilingual literature, and utilizing different forms of outreach to get a hold of your residents. And then, we talked a lot about participation, especially Missy's slide. With some communities, you're the only game in town. So essentially, you're sort of forced into the town or the city's program. But as we saw, others are, looking to actually grow their program because it's an opt-in program. So whichever one of those two that you fall in, there's work that you can do. So you can either strive for 100% participation, or like I said in the slide, 100% acceptance, which, it's a goal we probably won't ever get to, but there's certainly things you can do to affect that. Just some other little things here for drop-off communities. Like I said, work on those promotions constantly. You can put them in zero waste events. You can table at different places, sustainability fairs, etc. For curbside communities with competitions, like we talked about before, where private subscriptions are available, be sure you have those private hauler regulations in place, because that can be tricky if you don't. And for curbside communities that don't have the competition, like we said, the only game in town, focus on the compliance and work on promoting the benefits of the program. We heard Missy talk about Weston and Natick sharing, different stats and reinforcing all the positive effects that PAYT has had. And this is the next couple of tips are universal, really, for all PAYT communities. Encourage the environmentalists out there that waste is being reduced, that this is it's more than just, when people see funds and fees, they tend to shut out the possibility that there might be other positive impacts that go with it. But, so you do have to reiterate those. Reassure those financial skeptics that the process is equitable for residents. You pay for what you throw. We saw Missy share that great slide from Weston about their all their fees laid out. You are transparent in the financials, and your residents will trust you more, that if it is time to raise the fees, they will have evidence to show why that has to be done. And like I said, keep talking about the program, and that's for better or worse. So if things aren't going so well, keep talking about it. Talk about why not and why it has to be improved. And just a rapid fire, we talked about, Kathy mentioned bulky item fees, bags and carts was an option, talked about in Malden. Some of the others, charging for overflow bags, sharing the benefits. We can't reiterate these things enough. And then abatements for diversion efforts. That was another unique one we saw. And at this point, share it in the chat if you haven't seen anything. We're getting near the end of this presentation. So if you haven't seen, like I said, any of what's good about your community's program shared thus far in our presentation, pop it in the chat so we know about it and we can incorporate it in our next one. All right, and so what do you do now? You say, wow, this is great information. Who the heck do I contact to get all this stuff and really try to drive this home in our community? So that is why we have our grant assistance, our technical assistance grants, which are provided by our municipal assistance coordinators. There's a photo there. I believe all of us are on the call today, but I'll share the contact information. I'm going to leave that up there for a second, because I also wanted to mention that our presenters today, which I failed to introduce at the beginning, I don't know how I missed that slide, but let me talk about our presenters really quick. We had Kathy Mirza, who's probably the only one not listed on this, and that's our branch chief for the municipal waste reduction within MassDEP. So thank you so much, Kathy. We had Julia Green, we had Brian Walsh, and we had Missy Hollenbeck and myself, Ron Cochran. We are all municipal assistance coordinators, and our information is up here. And I think Brian's going to put a link, or already has put a link to this information in the chat. We are going to now make time for some questions. We really, I think, left with about 5 minutes. If you have to leave at the top of the hour, we're going to get Brian in here to start reviewing what questions we've seen in the chat. or if you'd like to ask your question verbally, please make sure to raise your hand. Another thing, there's a link to the survey, which again, I think Brian's going to pop that in the chat as well. We'd like to see if we could get more than the responses we got, because we really want to hear what's going on in your community, and we want to incorporate that into our survey results, which we can send out further. And lastly, again, this will be published on the MassDEP's YouTube channel, probably later part of next week. And we will also share the slides on the PAYT page at MassDEP. So with that, we are going to open it up to any questions. So Brian, why don't you start us off if you've seen any questions that have been unanswered in the chat thus far?
Yeah, it looks like most of them have been answered. Kathy's been doing a great job answering most of them. So if people haven't seen any of those and want to get a quick look in there, there was a first one about enterprise funds. There's some helpful links about that Kathy provided. Some information about limiting bulky waste through different reuse activities. But oops, I'm seeing that the survey link's saying permission. Let me see if I can close that out. But yeah, I think the best use will be if we want to open it up to, if anyone feels like a question hasn't been answered in the chat, definitely send it again. Otherwise, I think it makes sense to open it up to what might be on people's minds.
Well, we did see one just come in recently, and that was about the vending machine bag system. How, does it get jammed? Where does it come from? Wondering if we have anybody here from Worcester that might be able to speak to that, because that's not information that I know of as to whether or not there were problems with that vending machine. And if not, we can move on to anyone
here?
else's question.
Is Irene? So I live near Worcester, so I've, in the social media, I have not read any complaints. So usually that's the first place that any complaints pops up. The one thing about the vending machine in Worcester, and this is some of the criticism that residents have, it's kind of like a trial, but it's actually inside a kind of like a mini center for residents to get information from the hall, from the town, instead of having to go to the big, city hall kind of thing. They can get basic stuff at this site. It's kind of like, the RMV and going to AAA. So it's kind of like that. So the machine is basically monitored by an employee. So if there is a problem, there literally is somebody that you can go right there to talk to them about. So it's not out in the wild, on a street corner or somewhere. So that doesn't quite answer your question, but probably Worcester could answer a little bit more about how they how many jams and stuff they have with the bags inside the building. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Missy. And while we're waiting for a few other questions, I just brought that municipal assistance coordinator slide up. I think most of you on this call probably regularly talk with your MAC. It's really important. And then if you feel like you want to go to that next level and apply for a technical assistance grant, that can really help, because then that allows us the time to really dig deep into what your situation is, crunch some numbers for you. Because we really flew through some complicated stuff, and it can be difficult, in one presentation. So we tried to give you the high level ideas, but we also understand that getting this right can take more than just a quick whack at it. So we do encourage you to reach out to your MACs and apply for a technical assistance grant, or at least ask a few questions first to see if it's right for you. And I also want to, make note that we are currently running a Northeast Haulers Best Practices cohort, which a lot of you here are part of, and that reinforces some of Julia's important topics that she talked about with contracts. If you're not a part of this year's, you can always be a part of next year's. But why I mention it is because we do hear sometimes haulers, when they approach with a new contract, that we don't want you to have pay-as-you-throw be caught kind of in the dust or in the scraps when you are renegotiating your hauler contract. We want that to be preserved, emboldened, and strengthened through the contract, as was talked about earlier, about putting it right in your contract.
Ron, I just wanted to mention that if you're not part of the Northeast Best Practices cohort, you can also talk to your MAC, who can also help you with those questions for contracting as well.
All right, over to Brian. If you're seeing, you seeing any new questions?
Seeing anything new coming in? If anyone that was unfamiliar with the charm, it's a Center for Hard to Recycle Materials.
People can unmute too and just,
Yeah, if you wanted to interject, that's fine.
I'd like to know what was the most helpful thing to people in our webinar today. You can either unmute or stick it in the chat.
Maybe we wowed them so much that
I know.
they're just everybody's in shock at how brilliant this was. But I am impressed though, because we are, and I do want to be respectful of people's time too. It is now just after 3. We said we would stay around, but if there aren't any questions or comments, we can close it down. But again, we are going to make this available, for you guys to review later on. And we really do encourage you to absorb all this material as best you can. And, James, you're welcome, and all those. And be on behalf of MassDEP, as well as my presenting colleagues today, Kathy, Julia, Missy, and Brian, and all the other Max and all other DEP staff that has attended today, we'd like to thank you for your participation. And with that, we're going to ask that our core team stay on. We're just going to talk a little bit after.
I did get a question actually, Ron.
Oh, sure.
Sorry. Does going from a PAYT program without carts to one with carts provide an opportunity for folks to hide bags or other items in the carts?
Well, I think that this gets into what Julia mentioned earlier, which is working with your haulers about compliance and managing the contract. So if you're very clear about that, I think one of the on the slide, which I can go back to, it had language that worked very specifically into what the hauler should accept. And when you put that in your contract and then further you enforce it, then yes, of course, there will be times that folks tend to try to be non-compliant. But as long as you're all on the same page, you should be able to talk, to communicate. I'll give you a great example of it. In Malden, with that unicorn, the way Missy described it, there is that concept where you either have a blue bag in there, a PAYT bag, or you have a sticker. And little rhyme is blue bag or trash tag. And basically the hauler knows when they lift up that lid and see a regular Glad or Hefty bag, they got to check the front for a current sticker. If they see a blue bag that's compliant, it goes in. So again, as long as you're, I hope that answers your question, Allison. But that's pretty much, again, the communication with the hauler is critical. Julia? Yeah,
just to add to that too, is like if you're asking about the recycle card, if the people are throwing things into the recycle card, it's just, I think that a lot of, especially if you're going already from a pay-as-you-throw bag program to a curbside program, that you have your residents well trained already. So, but it still makes sense to be vigilant, especially the first few weeks, because you'll have new people maybe coming into the program. That's all. But usually it's not a big problem going from bags to curbside. If you're going from transfer station to curbside, you might have these new people who were paying a private hauler before, but now are in the municipal program, and they may need a little more training because they may not have had recycling at all offered to them in their curbside program with a private hauler. So.
Yeah, and also too, it goes to show you, I happen to know Allison in Somerville's program. you're right, Julia. You know, they're well primed for PAYT for a number of reasons, but chief among them would be that they already are tracking things like violations very closely in, you know, a customer relationship management system. So when something goes sour on the street, they know it pretty much right away. So the logical leap is to build those types of you know, that logic into your CRM system so that when you get non-compliance that's either reported by the hauler or by a waste inspector on the street, that it's an immediate turnaround. And listen, when you implement a new program, of course, there are going to be things that, you know, people are not going to get it. They're not going to understand. Mistakes will be made, but it's all about what happens on the whole after everyone has kind of come up to speed. All right, seeing no other questions, I think we are done. So again, if I could get that core team to just stay with us here, and for all you folks, have a great rest of your Wednesday afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to stop recording.